Alan, I think we should get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fact or Fiction. I'm Erin Benavides from Silver River Museum.
And I'm Mount Ivory with the Ford Museum up in Gainesville.
And I am so glad you have joined us today. We have some really important things to talk about. So I am going to share my screen and we'll get started. So we know in science, scientists are always attempting to solve problems. And there's a problem in our backyard that scientists want to solve. Have you ever seen these cute little critters? I see a few faces on my screen. Raise your hand if you've ever seen these guys. So these are all over the place. These are Cuban tree frogs. And you might think, how could such a cute frog be a problem? Well, these Cuban tree frogs were hitchhikers. In about the 1920s, they hopped on a cargo container, maybe full of bananas, I don't know, and they came to Florida from Cuba. And they are a problem, all right? We call them exotic, invasive. Here's a map showing you where they're found in Florida. Can you find where we're at? Find our county. We're in Marion County. And so this kind of odd shaped county here, almost like a square, but not quite, that's us. And it's in green, which means we have them here. So they're our problem too. And here is one of the ways that we can tell them apart from our Florida native frogs. Their toe pads are huge. Alan will show us a few other ways we can tell them apart in just a minute. And here's why they're a problem. Did you know animals can have an impact on the environment? Well, here's the Cuban tree frog having an impact on the environment. It is eating one of our native tree frogs. That's a problem. Here's another reason they're a problem. They take over. Here we have a man-made birdhouse, but they can do the same thing to bird nests and cavities where birds would live in trees. They take over, and then those animals don't have their place to live. Oh, and how about this? They can even have an effect on us. This is a toilet. You have vents on the roof of your house, and they really like to get in those vent tubes. And if they make their way all the way down, you might have an unwelcome surprise. Okay, so we know what the problem is. So scientists' goal is to solve this problem, right? And how are they going to do it? They're going to do it through investigations. So here's what your handout looks like today. Here's our claim. Scientists' questions are always answered with experiments. We want to decide if that claim is fact or fiction. And to do that, we're going to take a look at 3 different types of investigations. And each investigation has its own scientific question. Now, while we're going through them, make yourself a little sketch or a description in words, and it doesn't have to be full sentences here today, guys, of what the investigation is. And then after each one, we would like to answer, yes, it's an experiment, or no, it's not an experiment. And then after we're done here today, take some time with your teacher and do some of the critical thinking questions on the back of this handout. All right, so let me stop screen sharing because for our first investigation question, we need to take it to Alan, who's trying to answer, how does the type of food affect a Cuban tree frog's growth rate? All right, Alan, tell us about your investigation.
Awesome. So yeah, it's rather simple. My investigation is trying to figure out what food is going to make these Cuban tree frogs grow the most. You're going to find out here in a little bit, and I'll show you some in a little bit, that Cuban tree frogs get absolutely massive. I've had some in the past. I nicknamed him Methuselah. He's about the size of my hand and almost down to my button down here. So like 6-7 inches long. They get super, super big. So what food they're eating is probably pretty important. So I'm going to go and show you, I'll go ahead and show you one now. This one is still a young guy. You can see this guy is, oh, let me see, where's I gotta go? He's already pretty big. I mean, he's probably half the length of my hand. I mean, his feet are still the base of my hand down here. He's a rather big guy. And these guys, like Miss Aaron was saying, are eating our other Cuban tree frog or other native tree frogs. So we have to figure out what they're eating. All right, let me put you back in there. Have a good day, buddy. All right. So we're gonna see what kind of food they're eating and how big they'll get on that kind of food. So the first food we're gonna look at is a nice little wax worm. So let me pull this up. Let's see, it's a little wax worm. I don't know how well you can see it, but he basically looks like a maggot. He has some hair on his back, but he's full of all types of nutrients. So that's our first little food type. We also got some wax worms over here. Now these wax worms, show you again, they're a little bit bigger. You can see he's a lot bigger on my finger. These guys move a little bit faster, so a little bit harder to catch, but they also have this hard shell on them. And so I want to see if they can eat that hard shell. Anyway, for this little test, I have two rather young Cuban tree frogs. Let me show you how big they are. Let's see, where are you at? Here we go. Perfect. He's a lot smaller. So this guy was recently a tadpole. He's a lot smaller of a Cuban tree frog. And I have another one in another enclosure that's about equal sized. So I keep them separate because I don't want them messing with each other, but their enclosures are exactly the same. Where they're living is exactly the same. Same type of bed to sleep on, same type of water, same amount of water, and I'm giving them the same amount of food, just a different type of food. That's the only thing that I'm changing in this. But yeah, I think you can take it away, Aaron.
All right, Alan. So I just want to recap here, okay? So you are trying to figure out how the two different types of worms, it was wax worms and what was the other type?
Mealworms.
Mealworms, how they affect the growth of the Cuban tree frog, right?
Yep, so once a week I weigh them on a scale.
So you're changing the food and you're measuring their weight.
Yep.
And then there's things about their environment that you're keeping the same, that you're controlling, right?
Yep, temperature and all sorts of things I'm keeping the
So
same.
you're controlling the temperature, the bedding, the amount of worms that they're getting, right? Their lighting. There's a lot of things that you, the scientists, are controlling. Okay, so students, here's where we've got to do some thinking, right? Is Alan's first investigation an experiment or some other type of science? Teachers, do me a favor, please, and take a quick vote, a poll in your class, and then type in chat and tell us whether they think it's an experiment or something else. So yes or no, you can answer in chat. All right, we've got one vote for yes, it's an experiment. I'm waiting for a few more votes to come in. We have yes, experiment, vote number 2. All right, we're gonna go ahead, yes, experiment for Miss Boutwell's class as well. And Miss Herbert's class says something else. Okay, here's the deal, my friends. Here are the defining characteristics of a scientific experiment. Number 1, the scientist changes one thing on purpose. Alan, were you changing one thing on purpose?
I'm trying to.
What was it? What's the one thing you changed on purpose?
Type of food.
type of food. Number two, the scientist measures something, what they think will be the effect. What did you measure, Alan?
The frog's weight.
Okay, and then the scientist keeps everything else the same on purpose. They control all of the other variables. Were you doing that, Alan?
Amount of worms, temperature, food. Yep.
All right, so survey says, yes, this one is an experiment. Alan was changing one thing on purpose, measuring one thing, and controlling everything else. All right. Okay, Alan, you have another investigation, right? Because you're trying to answer a different scientific question as well.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us about that investigation?
Of course. So for the longest time now, I've been wanting to see where frogs are living. So can you still see my PowerPoint? Still can? Perfect. So I've been wanting to see where frogs would like to live. Would they want to live in the city? They want to live on someone's farm? Do they want to go and live deep in the forest? I want to see where these Cuban tree frogs will prefer to live. And so to do so, I've set up a few different places with some frog tubes. And you'll see a frog tube here in a minute. But just to show you a little of a map, I have some in Gainesville, where I live. I have some down in Ocala, closer to y'all. And I also have some in my hometown of Crest River. Now, what these frog tubes look like is some PVC pipes, just some white pipe used for plumbing. And you stick it in the ground, and it just so happens frogs love to go inside to have a warm place to live. Sometimes insects lay their eggs on the inside. And so my job is I just check on these frog tubes every now and then and see where these Cuban tree frogs are deciding to live. Some places I find more than others. I think that summarizes this little project pretty well.
All right, Alan. So, well, let me add this spotlight back. So to recap, you've got these tubes in all different kinds of habitats. And occasionally you go to the tubes and you count up the number of frogs in the tubes, right?
That sounds about right.
So easy peasy, you're trying to answer the question, in which habitat do you find the most Cuban tree frogs? So students, again, is this an experiment? Yes or no? He's still trying to answer a scientific question, but is he using an experiment to do it? So take a vote in your class and let's see what you think about this one. Is this an experiment? Ooh, Miss Herbert's vote is in. I'm not going to read it out loud yet. I'm waiting on 2 more votes here, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so we have 3 no votes and 1 yes vote. All right, so let's think about what we said was important for an experiment. Okay, in an experiment, the scientist changes one thing on purpose. Did you, Alan?
I'm just watching. I'm not changing anything about them.
Right. But you did put your tubes in different habitats, right?
That's fair.
Okay, the scientist measures something. Were you measuring or observing something?
Just seeing where they live.
So he was measuring how many frogs were there. He was counting them. Now the third one's the important one. They control everything else. They keep everything else the same. Are you able to keep everything the same in the habitat?
I cannot keep everything the same out in the world.
What are some variables that you can't control in those habitats?
Ooh, how much it's raining, the weather in general. Those are some big things I can't change.
Yeah, you can't control what they're eating, right?
No.
You can't control if people are coming around messing with your tubes. So in this case, because Alan cannot control all of the other environments, this is an observational study. The tubes are helping him make his observations, but he is not controlling anything. So this one is not an experiment. All right, and to answer our last scientific question, what data is missing to help us control the population of Cuban tree frogs? We have a special guest, don't we, Alan?
Yes, we do. We have
Would
Miss
you
Zoe
introduce
Hendrickson, and she is a master's student here at UF with me. And she has some really interesting things to share with us as well. So I'm excited to hear.
Alrighty, hi everybody. So Alan was sharing with you some ways that we investigate questions through experiments, but the way I answer my questions, I may or may not be using experiment. We'll have to see what you guys think. So I'm gonna share my screen with you guys. Let me make sure I have the right one. All right. Can you guys see that? Oh, that's the wrong one. Oops, I'm so sorry. Oh no, wait, I think this is the right one. Can you guys see the tree frog on the screen? Okay, perfect. So I am working with the University of Florida, but I also work with a government agency called the U.S. Geological Survey. And what they do is they like to track invasive species like tree frogs, like these Cuban tree frogs. So I'm going to show you guys a map of where we have found these tree frogs. So really similar to Alan's map, he showed you where his study sites were, but all of these little dots on this map represent places that we have found Cuban tree frogs. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit right here. So right here is Gainesville, and down here is Marion County and Ocala, where you guys are at. So I'm going to show you a cool thing I can do. So if I'm a researcher and I say, okay, I want to look at all of the records from this part of Florida, I can circle this area, and then my map will highlight all of the sightings of these frogs. So then I'm going to click on this button called Records. And we're going to wait a second because my internet is slow. Okay. And so then this will show me all of the scientists and all of some of the citizens that have just found these guys in their backyard, all of the documentations of these frogs. Now, I didn't personally go out and see all of these frogs and make a record. We rely on other scientists and people just like you to tell us when they see these frogs so we can know what's going on. So our question about what data is missing to help control the population of these frogs, we need to find out first and foremost where they are to know how they're impacting our community. So I do want to show you another map really quick that I really like. So this map will show you how the frogs have moved from Cuba, where they're originally from, all the way up into the United States. And so it started way back in 1927. And as we move forward, I want you to watch the red dots. So now we're in 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and oh, they're going everywhere now. 1980s, 90s, 2000s, and then now they have just exploded by 2021. So like Ms. Benavides said earlier, these guys are hitchhikers, and they really like to travel on plants that we buy at nurseries and things like that. So this is what's important to track these guys. So I think that's all I have for my study, if that's all right.
Of course it is. Alan, will you help us? Oh, there we go. We can add a spotlight now. All right. So we need to think about Zoe's study. She's looking at data to answer her question, right? And it's not data that she's collected. She's using those maps. She's using the observations from other scientists. She's using the experiments from other scientists. So here's the question. We need to vote one more time. Is Zoe doing a scientific experiment to answer her question? Yes or no? Go ahead and vote. Yes or no? right, I have 1 vote in so far. There's 2. We need 2 more votes. And we're waiting on 1 more vote. All right, so pretty much every class said no, this is not an experiment. One class did say it was an observation. All right, so Zoe, are you making the actual observations?
Not me personally, no.
So this type of scientific investigation is not an experiment. You guys all recognize that. Zoe is not changing one thing on purpose. She's not measuring one thing. She's not controlling variables, right? But it's also not an observation. You see, there's many, many, many different types of scientific experiment or investigations. Ooh, not use that experiment word. So Zoe's investigation is what we call a data analysis. And Zoe, it's going to help us ask more questions and design more investigations, right?
Yeah, so a really important thing about data analysis is you have scientists everywhere, just like Alan, collecting all of this data. And sometimes when you have so much information, it's helpful to look back and say, okay, well, do we see any more patterns? What's going on? What are some questions we can ask ourselves, looking just at data we've already collected?
So this is one way our scientific community works together, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Alan, I think we have some time for some questions. Do you want to go ahead and help lead that?
Of course. Yeah. So if my teachers would like to discuss with your class for about a minute or so, we'll be waiting for some questions here in chat. So just take some time with your class. All right, so we have a good first question. It's from this Battlewell's class, and it's, how did the frogs get over here in the first place?
Do you want to take that one, Alan, or shall I?
Sure, I don't mind taking it.
We'd probably answer the same thing. Go ahead.
It'd be the same thing, yeah. So about 100 years ago at this point, so the 1920s, those lots of cargo ships. So the same way there's a lot of cargo ships today. We ended up finding some Cuban tree frogs sticking away on these little cargo embankments or these cargo ships. But I will go and add to this, the modern day version of which is airplanes. And so if you go to states outside of Florida, you'll see at airports Cuban tree frogs over in Denver, Colorado, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, where they usually can't live. But just because they're on an airplane, they can stay in the cargo and live their life out there for a little bit.
Yeah, I will add to that, cars are a really big one now. And if you go and buy a plant in one place, they really like to hide inside palm trees and things. So if you buy a plant from a plant nursery or they decide to hop on your car, that's a big way that they've been spreading.
Yeah. Ooh, so we have Miss Leon's question is, what is your conclusion from the scientific experiment with waxworms? So this experiment is still ongoing, but my hypothesis, based on the research I've done, here's kind of my thoughts on it, is that the waxworms have this like hard shell on them, and I don't think that frogs can digest or eat that shell too well. I think those other worms, the mealworms, are a little bit better for the frogs, or at least make them grow faster. Okay, we have lots of questions. I love this. So we have from this borders class, we have, can they jump backwards? How many are in Florida? How high can they jump? Are the Cuban tree frogs poisonous? What kind of frogs do Cuban tree frogs eat? Are any of those something that you want to take care of, or else I'll just fire away?
So let's see. Favorite habitat, I can tackle that for a minute.
Okay.
So one of the reasons that Cuban tree frogs are such a problem in Florida is that they really like our climate and our habitat, and they can survive really well here. And like Alan was saying, if they fly to Denver or something like that, that's a much different climate than Florida. So they can live in a wide variety of places, but mainly they like our warm, wet climate. So that's what they like.
Yeah, I find a lot of my frogs in the swamp or in just really moist areas lots of the times. As for that list of other questions, I'll just fire away. I'll get through them really quickly. Can they jump backwards? No, not really. Their legs are built in a way that it pushes them forward. It's kind of like a jetpack. It pushes them forward in one direction. They can go a little bit left to right, but for the most part, wherever they're facing, that's where they're going. How many are in Florida? I have no way of giving a good answer for this. I'd put it in the tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, probably even higher than that.
I can say really quick, as far as records go, we probably have over 10,000 records, and that's just sightings alone. So that's just 10,000 people being like, I saw one today. So there's way more.
There's quite a few of these. And the reason why is based on some of these later questions. So for example, are Cuban tree frogs poisonous? Generically, I'll label them poisonous. It's enough that other animals don't want to eat them. And so, for example, like if I was to eat, like lick my fingers right now after grabbing that Cuban tree frog, my throat might get a little bit swollen a tiny bit, or if I rub my eyes, I'll definitely like have a swollen eye. I had a guy last weekend tell me that he made his eye completely swell shut. But as for animals, it'll make them to where they spit the animal out. So birds won't eat them necessarily, or snakes won't eat them. Then what kind of frogs do the Cuban tree frogs eat? So we mainly have like 3 different types of tree frogs. There's more, but there's 3 main types: your greens, your squirrels, and then pinewood tree frogs. And they never get more than maybe an inch or 2 long, maybe on a really good day, 3 inches. And they'll just eat them whole. So they eat all sorts of tree frogs. And then the last one was how high do they jump? I couldn't tell you exactly, but I'm pretty sure I've seen one jump like 16 feet or something. It was some abnormal record, or jumped off a building and made it 16 feet. I digress. All right, I'll give you this one. From Ms. Herbert's class, how old do they get?
Oh, for me? I'm really not sure, Alan.
Yeah,
I
no
think
worries.
a couple years at least, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in the 5-year range is typically how long they can live, about 3 to 5 years. They are one of the longer living tree frogs. And so it's kind of a problem, never eating everything, and they live forever. Just a double whammy.
In tree frog terms, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
All right, guys, it looks like we're at the end of our questions, and a big thank you to Zoe for joining us and sharing with us the science that she's working on as a graduate student at UF. So in case you didn't hear, she's getting her master's degree in fisheries and aquatic science. And a big thank you to Alan for showing us his Cuban tree frog investigations. And students, I would love to see some of your critical thinking. So teachers, if you work on the back of those handouts, send them to us. Let us see their work. All right, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.